Most sources will point back to the early 15th to 18th century Europe as the starting point of newspaper production. Interestingly enough, the early printing press technology in Europe was also invented around the 1400s, paving the way for mass production of newspapers. So it makes sense, right? But here's another interesting thing about the history of news and newspaper, but this time it's more baffling and quite ironic, if you ask me. Around the late 1700s, a Scottish scholar named George Chalmers, please correct me if I'm wrong, discovered in the British Museum a newspaper called the English Mercury, which dates back to around 1588. Back then, it was considered as one of the earliest printed news materials, not just in England, but in Europe. The discovered newspaper, the English Mercury, contained an account of the English battle with the Spanish Armada, apparently. Fast forward to 1839, Thomas Watts, a librarian in the British Museum, uncovered the truth about the English Mercury. What he discovered was that the English Mercury was nothing but a hoax. It was discovered that it was merely a literary game orchestrated by Philip York, the second Earl of Hardwicke, and some of his buddies in the late 1700s. It was nothing but a joke. Could you imagine that? That for 45 years, the British people accepted whatever was written on that supposedly historical document as truth. What's more baffling is the idea that the early history of news and newspaper production is marred by issues of fabrication and hoax. I'm not sure if I should say this, but I guess from that point on, the rest is history, right? The late 1800s brought the telegraph and the telephone. In the 1900s, radio technology had a commercial grade version ready to be used for broadcasting. The television was invented in the 20s. The internet was created in the 70s and became more prevalent in the 90s with the World Wide Web. The 2000s brought the age of social media, and here we are now, the era of deep fakes and AI technology. But the narrative stays the same, doesn't it? Each significant point in history of news had had their versions of the English Mercury hoax, albeit they were circulated in their own respective ways. I guess you could say that the quest for truth will always be accompanied by falsehood. In the context of the Philippines, some sources would consider Del Superior Gobierno as the first newspaper printed in the country. It was first published in 1811, and it was exclusively reporting news about the political conditions in Europe, specifically in Spain, of course. Well, you also have the most interesting ones that either incite rebellion or spread propaganda against the Spanish regime. You have Diario de Manila in 1889, La Independencia in 1898, and the ever famous La Solidaridad. These ones make you think, about how news and newspapers can really potentially influence the way society thinks and acts. Well, more about this later. During the American era in the Philippines, there came more familiar names such as the Manila Times in 1898, the Manila Bulletin in 1900s, and in the modern era came again the Manila Bulletin, Philippine Daily Inquirer, and the Philippine Star. Of course, there have been radio and TV broadcasts as soon as those technologies came to the country. The same is true when the internet arrived in the country in the 90s, and the format of spreading news through the World Wide Web became a thing. Interestingly enough, perhaps the highlight of the historical timeline of evolution of news and newspapers in the Philippines would be the existence of those revolutionary tabloids and propaganda papers that circulated in the public during the Spanish and American colonization. This potentially tells us how much news and media could somehow influence, incite, or even alter the perspectives of a nation's citizens. After all, there could be an argument that at least half of the success of the Philippine Revolution could and should be attributed to propaganda and revolutionist journalism. These ideas will play out in our later episodes, just like what I said. So just bear with me for a while as we try to finish this one. The last thing that I want to talk about in this very important pilot episode is the criticisms and analysis done on news across history. Let me be direct because I don't want to bore you with more history. Simply put, news has always been criticized or analyzed on two areas: its truth value and, for the lack of better term, partisanship. Previously, I have mentioned that one of the most important events in the history of news, especially in Europe, was the literary hoax, the English Mercury. The very existence of this seemingly ironic historical account tells us that one of the things that people scrutinize about news is whether there will be some sort of a betrayal of public trust. And truth be told, no pun intended, even to this date, criticism about the truth values of news is still a thing. The prevalence of fake news and disinformation campaign, especially in the Philippines, tells us so. I remember when I was still taking my PhD in applied linguistics, the topic that was assigned to me for my topic presentation in my language and literature course was fake news. At first, I was baffled. Why are we studying fake news in language and literature? Then, as I did my research and readings for my report, I finally understood news is discourse, remember? And it, being a discourse, means that it is composed of linguistic units. The language used in news, and fake news for that matter, controls the truth value that the text carries. And those constructed truths are being mass produced and distributed to the public for consumption. What's worse is some entities even weaponize fake news for their own benefit. News is also criticized and analyzed based on whether it's biased or not. Partisan journalism seems to have been one of the major concerns of the public. Look no further than the current ABS CBN shutdown in May 2020. Even until now, there are still some shakeups on the trust of the public in traditional media, some even stating that traditional media is, quote, biased against the government, resulting to some individuals preferring social media news over the traditional one. Of course, these claims are up for debate, but if there's something I personally want to impart to you, my dear listeners, is that we have to always remember that the primary essence of news is that it's a discourse circulated among the public, characterized by timeliness, relevance, and truth. Yes, there have been controversies and even actual proven instances of biased reporting, canned news, and other related instances, but news wants to be the bearer of the truth, no matter what that truth is. News is also trying its best to be as neutral as possible. There's more to this show than this lecture about news and its critics. Again, this is simply one of the foundational episodes for this whole podcast, but I cannot stress enough how important the knowledge about the real essence of news is. How important it is to set our minds that news does receive criticism and that people not only passively consume news, but they also actively engage in constructing the meanings, truths, and ideologies that the news brings. This episode is written, produced, recorded, researched, and edited by yours truly. You can catch this podcast through its YouTube channel, Press and Prejudice, and soon, hopefully, on Spotify. Just search for the title. You can also follow this show's socials. Like us on Facebook at Press and Prejudice, and follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Press and Prej. You may also send your concerns, comments, suggestions, and literally anything that you want to send to pressandprej.podcast@gmail.com. Thank you for listening. This has been Press and Prejudice. I'll see you in the next big scoop.